Welcome to day 19 JavaScript question. Today we will be solving execute asynchronous functions in parallel. The question says given an array of asynchronous functions, we need to return a promise. Each of the function in the array accepts no argument and returns a promise. Promise resolves when all the promises returned from the function were resolved successfully in parallel. The resolved value of promise should be an array of the resolved value of promises in the same order as they were in the functions. And the promise rejects when any of the promises returned from the functions were rejected. Promise should also reject with the reason of the first rejection. Now let's look at the example. Here we have one function that resolves after 200 milliseconds. So in the output, we get resolved with the value at 200 milliseconds. Let's look at another example. Here we have two functions. The first one resolves after 200 milliseconds and the second one rejects after 100 milliseconds. So in the output, we get rejected and the time is 100 milliseconds because we are executing in parallel. So as this function rejects, we reject our promise. If we execute these two functions in sequence, then this will take 300 milliseconds. First 200 for this and then 100 for this. One thing that comes to our mind is we can solve it using Promise.all function. But the question says please solve it without using the built-in Promise.all function because they want you to learn the working of Promise.all function. So let's start. First of all, we need to return a promise. It takes resolve and reject. Now we need to return an array. So let's create an array. Let's call it result and it will be an array. Let's give it a size equal to the functions array and fill it with null. Let's also create a variable resolved count. We will increment it each time a promise is resolved. Now we need to loop over all the functions in the functions array and call it. So we will use for each loop and it will take a function. Let's make it async because we need to wait and we will get element and the index. Now you might think why we are using for each loop and not the regular for loop. There is a reason because in regular for loop, if we use a wait keyword, then it blocks the whole loop and we cannot call all the functions parallelly. But in this case, if we use async, it will block that call and proceed to further calls. So we can execute all the functions parallelly. We will create a try catch block here because we need to reject if we get rejection from the function. So try and here we'll call catch. So if we get error, so we just reject by passing that error. That's it. And for try, we'll create a variable and await. We will call the function. That is the element we get like this. And after we get the result from the await call, we just place the result at its index. So result. Now we will increment the resolved count. And if the resolved count equals functions.length, it means we have resolved all the promises and we need to resolve and we will pass the result. That's it. Let's submit it and it works. Thanks for watching. Follow for more such content. See ya.